today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about digital drivers of conflict and miscommunication. Think about how what you're going to say is going to be received by the other person in their worst possible state. The technology itself fuels relationship drama. Even when you're not arguing on screens, they'll still shape how you fight. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about digital drivers of conflict and miscommunication. Have you ever had a text argument spiral out of control? I don't think so, right? Not you. You meant one thing, your partner read another, and before you knew it, you were having a full-blown fight over something that probably wouldn't have been an issue face-to-face if there had been tone, if there had been context. Imagine if technology, if screens strengthened your relationship instead of creating more misunderstandings. What if you could resolve digital conflicts or any conflict before they exploded? Well, I'm here to tell you in this series on screens and digital consumption that when we're careful about what we consume, when we consume it, and how we use screens and digital communication, we can craft an amazing partnership that supports us not only to grow as individuals, not only as partners, but as leaders in our family. So why do digital communications create more conflict and clarity? The truth is you're more likely to fight with your partner because of screens, not just on them. Well, part of what we've been talking about is that when we've been consuming a lot of content that is sexual or violent in nature, it's going to detract from our relationship in some way, shape, or form. And you can go back to the previous episodes if you want to learn more about that. I'm not going to beat that horse to death, but the short story is that the unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. And when we spend a lot of time in violent and sexual spaces on screens, our unconscious mind is in there as if it were real. And that impacts how we show up in life. The real challenge is communicating digitally. There's a lack of tone and context. Text messages, for example, lack tone and body language, and that makes them ripe for misinterpretation. Not only do they lack tone and body language, but the person who's delivering them is in a different context emotionally and physically than the person who's receiving them. So imagine that I'm at work and I'm super busy. I'm Brad. I'm super busy. And I send my wife a text message, Gwen, and I'm kind of hyped up. And so the text message has some energy in it. And Gwen is totally relaxed. She's taking a time out and she reads it and she goes, "Oh, Brad is always so pushy." Right? Some of the tone comes through. But not only that, it pushes her buttons. Imagine that I send her a message saying, "Hey, we're out of milk. Would you get some milk? We really need milk." And she hears that as, he's always trying to get me to do more. Doesn't he think I do enough? Maybe she's feeling a little blue, right? Because Brad am texting Gwen, and the context that I'm operating from is different than the context that she's receiving in, that amps up the possibility that the message is going to be misconstrued. And because it lacks tone and it lacks body language, that quadruples the possibility that it's going to be misreceived. Instant reactions are what we're used to because of our heavy use of screens, right? Screens teach us, I can get what I want now. I can't tell you how many times I've thought, wow, I need some Gorilla Tape to finish that project. Whoop, oh, it's coming tomorrow. Wow. I need to replace those fixtures. New fixtures coming. I can get it done like that. Instant gratification. And so our association with digital communication, screens, and text messaging is that it's going to be instant. And so when we send, we don't often think about what we're sending. How many times have you ordered something online? You put in that you want something specific. You see something that seems to fit the bill. You order it and you get it, and it isn't the same because you were in such a rush to get it done. You just said, "This looks good and I'll get it." How many times have you bought, what's a great example of this? Something really specific. all I'm looking for, I'll be a Phillips head screwdriver, but I don't put in Phillips head. I put in screwdriver. And what I get is a different kind of screwdriver. Or maybe I get a Phillips head that's the wrong size or whatever, because I wasn't as specific. I was in a rush and I wanted to get it done and I wanted gratification now. Well, we've all learned to be a lot more careful when we're ordering online because we get tired of doing returns. But in our marriages, we take that same mindset of I need to get this done now, and we're not careful because when it's returned to us, it's returned as, and Gwen is thinking, he doesn't think I'm doing enough. She texts back, why am I going to pick up the milk? Don't I do enough? You're at work. Why don't you get it? And so instead of getting that what we did was not contextualize what we were asking for enough to get what we wanted, we blame them. Sometimes we do this online, by the way. Sometimes we ordered the wrong thing and blame them. We say, oh, inadequate description, even though the description was really clear. We just didn't take the time to read it. We are wired more and more for instant reactions rather than thoughtful responses. People type before they think, leading to impulsive, emotionally charged messages. And when people read, they react instead of thinking, what's the context that Brad must be in right now? Oh, he's at work. He's always a little fired up at work. This isn't really about me. The pressure of always available means that we expect a reply immediately and increases stress and resentment. In fact, the younger the person is, the more likely they are to expect an instant response. I'll put it to you this way. My parents are in their 90s and they don't carry their freaking phones unless it's an emergency. If I text them or email them, they have no urge or desire or inclination to respond until they feel like it, which I find at times a little disrespectful, but it's just how they are. My kids have the same experience with me. My rules around email are I have at least 24 hours to get to it. My rule around texting is sometime today. Their rules around email is sometime today, and around texting is now. In fact, the younger the generation, the faster the response they expect. And when we're married, we start to transpose these expectations. We haven't made an agreement about how fast it is. We haven't talked about it. I remember one of the earliest boundaries my wife and I made was how fast do we expect a response? If it's an emergency, we want a response now. But, she understands that for me, texting has low urgency. She should call me if it's urgent. The technology itself fuels relationship drama. Even when you're not arguing on screens, they'll still shape how you fight. No, we're not going back to the episode we did previously where we're talking about the influence of what we consume, but we are, kind of. I've had at least one couple that I've worked with where a partner was upset about what the other one was consuming on social media. And you need to get that this is very contextual on the culture that you grow up in. I've shared before about a couple I read about where they're living in separate cities. One's in New York, the other's in the UK. And the one in the UK is having an affair, quote unquote, with an AI and says it's the best thing that ever happened to her marriage. And her husband is consuming pornography, actually not in New York, in LA, I think it is. And they are acting out their sexual drives through pornography and with the AI. And they think or believe or agree that this is not infidelity because it's not with another person. And this way they can take a time out and come back to the married later on. Now, for some couples, this would be egregious. It would be considered cheating. It would be considered infidelity. It would be considered bad for the marriage. We need to have an understanding about what we're going to look at, what we're going to like even on social media. If in social media, it's not unusual today for our exes to be in our friend zone. If we are on social media and our partner's on social media and they like a post that their ex is putting out, it might be triggering for us and vice versa. We need to be thinking about this. Social media jealousy is not only likely, it occurs often and it brings trust into question. Frame it this way. If you were living in a small town and you were married and your childhood sweetheart were living in the same town and was unmarried, and your partner saw you talking to your childhood sweetheart and kind of liking and laughing it up and having a good time together, your partner probably wouldn't like it. They might feel threatened by it, even if it would seem meaningless. The question you want to ask yourself when you're doing that kind of thing on social media is like being in a small town or a big town, and your partner sees it and sees the kind of interactions you're having. The question you want to ask yourself is, how much pressure do I really want to put on my relationship or my marriage? Why would I want to be chatting it up or approving my ex's posts? If my partner can see it, why would I want to put my partner through that? Not so much, well, doesn't he trust me or doesn't she trust me? It's less, why would I even put pressure on that trust in that way? Sometimes we can fight through avoidance. I have seen individuals vent online about problems in their relationship. They're not even separated or divorced, and they're venting. This is like the hyped up version of, flirting with your ex. I've seen people scrolling to escape, or even worse, couples ghost each other. The best is I had a couple where they blocked each other on social media while they were working with me. They were so mad at each other. They were still married, still living in the same household, but blocked each other on social media. What's the message that we're giving? Why would we fuel the fire in that way? Are your conflicts public or are they private? Are you oversharing or are you vague posting things that might trigger your partner? Maybe you don't even know you're doing it. You might be doing it unconsciously. I think the challenge that I'm laying down here is we want to all of us be thinking about what's the pressure we're putting on the boundaries of our relationship. If our relationship is kind of fragile because we're leading in parallel lives, we want to be even more careful. If it's super tight, we still want to be careful. Brad saw Gwen laughing at her phone and assumed that she was texting another guy. He didn't ask. He just pulled away emotionally and made distance worse. Or another scenario is Brad saw Gwen laughing at her phone and assumed she was making a joke about him with a friend, and he felt distant. Now, is that Gwen's fault? No. And maybe yes, because if she lives with Brad, she knows he's sensitive. And so maybe she needs to be more careful about that. Maybe she needs to be laughing at her phone and noticing his reaction and saying, hey, hon, here's what I was laughing about. Look at these dogs. Are they cute or what? Maybe what needs to be happening is there needs to be sensitivity to your partner's sensitivity. But how we react to our screens and our phones and how much we share is really important. There's a whole argument in the world of family coaching, marriage coaching, about should you give your screen to your partner to go through? And my argument is yes, complete transparency. And if your partner is going through your phone on a regular basis, something's really wrong. My wife and I have complete transparency, but I never go through her phone. I want to, I can. If she wants to go through mine, she can, but we don't do it because we have trust. But it's important to have that permission to help have trust. If we feel like we're hiding things from each other, it diminishes trust. So let's talk about how to prevent and de-escalate digital fights. You can stop screens from making things worse and even use them to build connections, but it's about being mindful and conscientious. The first thing is, if you're in the position that Gwen was in when Brad said, hey, would you pick up some milk? And you want to assume positive intent. And if you're having trouble assuming positive intent, you need to take a look at where you are in yourself, or maybe where you are in your relationship. If you're having trouble assuming positive intent, something's up. And maybe you need to talk about what's up more than the reaction the text is giving you. The second is that you want to set some boundaries about the purpose of text. For example, a ground rule that I give couples that I'm working with who are married and couples that I'm working with who are trying to parent together after divorce is to only use text for logistics. You don't want to process emotion via text. Use text for, can you pick up some milk? Use text for, I'm going to be a little late. Use text for, what time are you going to be home? Use text for, I'll bring the kids to see you at X time. And Only one logistical thing at a time. And when you have agreement on that, you move on to the next one. You don't want to use text for emotional content, and you don't want to use text for a laundry list of logistics because that muddies the water. One logistic at a time, complete, move on to the next. Save the tough emotional stuff for face-to-face conversation. Or if you really can't, then try a well thought out email. I'm not a big fan of email for emotional communication, but if you have something that you just don't think you can be anything but reactive about, you're going to want to write the email once, don't send it, don't go for that immediate gratification, then read it again and edit it, and keep editing it until it sounds like something you could read without being triggered. Use tech for connection, not conflict. So you could, the exception to the emotional text would be to send supportive messages like, "You're doing great. I'm so proud of you. Great job, honey. I love it when you do X. You're so amazing." Right? That would be where you could afford to be emotional. Watch out for passive aggressive text or text that might be construed as passive aggressive. Like, "I'm so busy. You seem to have some time. Could you pick up the milk?" That might not be passive aggressive, but it also might be a way of saying, "I'm always busy. You never are." It might be read that way also, even if you didn't intend it that way. So think about how what you're going to say is going to be received by the other person in their worst possible state. All right. Imagine them in their worst possible state. Brad and Gwen worked out this thing with the laughing by the next time that happened, Brad asked her what she was laughing at. And it turns out it was a funny dog meme, just like the example I gave you, because he took the time to ask. And he said, "You know what, Gwen?" Afterwards, he said, "You know what? I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but I thought you were, laughing at me or laughing with someone else. I just didn't know. And thank you for sharing that with me." And Gwen said, "Brad, babe, I love you, man. Love you so much. You don't have to ever worry about that. I got you. And let's talk about like what's going on with you that you would think that, because I'm wingman, Brad, wingwoman, Brad." They both realized that things could escalate quickly and that it was really important to talk about those small insecurities that maybe we're even a little ashamed of, to air them out, to take the risk that your partner might say, "What? Are you crazy?" or whatever. Digital conflict is only part of the problem, just like what we watch is only part of the problem of how we interact. Just like the digital world drives a need for more, better now, what about the way technology disrupts the time we actually spend together? In the next episode, we're going to talk more about life. I'm really not sure what we're going to call the episode. Work-life balance, relationship, life balance. It might be about balance between being mindful and mindless. I actually like that a lot, because we all need to be a little bit mindless sometimes, right? Don't we all just need to just roll under the covers and put our head under a pillow and just be mindless? And the truth is, if we're mindful all the time, it grinds us down. It's more than work life. It's like work play almost balance. The next episode is going to be more about that. In the meantime, if you're liking what you're hearing, subscribe, share it. We can only reach the 10,000 people that we want to reach, helping them to have joyful and prosperous marriages that are off the hook if you share this message that we're putting out there. Thank you for listening to another episode of Rich in Relationship. Have an awesome day and a fantastic tomorrow.